When we think of the Caribbean, we often picture sunny beaches, blue waters, and vibrant music. But long before tourists and cruise ships arrived, these islands were home to a remarkable people. They were the indigenous inhabitants who shaped the very identity of this region. Among the most well-known of these groups were the people we call the Caribs. Their story is a fundamental part of the Caribbean's past. It is a tale of resilience, of skilled navigators, and of a culture that has endured against all odds. Understanding who they were is essential to understanding the soul of the Caribbean itself. Their presence laid the foundation for the societies that would later emerge across the archipelago, leaving a mark that is still visible today. The Caribs were not just one single unified nation. They were a diverse group of peoples connected by language and culture. They lived on the islands of the Lesser Antilles, the smaller chain of islands that curve from Puerto Rico down to the coast of South America. Their societies were built on a deep knowledge of the sea and the land. They were expert canoe builders and sailors, traveling long distances between islands for trade, kinship, warfare. Their villages were often located near the coast, where they could easily access marine resources. These communities were the vibrant heart of the pre-Columbian Caribbean, filled with the sounds of their language, the smells of their cooking, and the rhythms of their daily lives. The importance of the Caribs to Caribbean identity cannot be overstated. For centuries, their history was told primarily by outsiders, often by the very European colonizers who sought to conquer them. However, by looking at archaeology, listening to the oral traditions passed down through generations, and studying the historical records with a critical eye, we can piece together a more accurate and fascinating picture of their world. Their legacy is not just a thing of the past, it is a living heritage. Today, descendants of the Carib people continue to live in the Caribbean, particularly in the island of Dominica. They call themselves the Kalinago, and they are the guardians of their ancestral traditions. Learning their story is more than just a history lesson. It is an act of recognition and respect for the first people of these islands. Their tale is one of survival, adaptation, and the enduring strength of a people connected to their island home. The word Carib has become famous throughout the world. It is the name given to a sea, a chain of islands, a whole region. But where did this powerful word come from? What did it originally mean? The word itself is not what the people called themselves. It was a label given to them by others. The term most likely originates from a word in one of the Arawakan languages, spoken by the Taino people of the Greater Antilles. The Taino used a word that sounded like Cariba or Caniba. They used this word to describe people living on the islands to the southeast, the people we now call the Caribs. The meaning of Cariba is debated by historians and linguists. For a long time it was thought to mean strong or brave, suggesting the Taino saw them as formidable warriors, respected for their strength. But another, more controversial meaning was attached later. The Spanish heard the word and linked it to cannibal. Cannibal, meaning cannibal. That link had devastating consequences. Justification for enslavement and land seizure. Remember, the people had their own names. Men called themselves Kalinago, women called themselves Kalipuna. These names held deep cultural significance, tied to creation stories and their worldview. Carib was an external label that stuck in records and maps. Naming by outsiders often redefined indigenous identities in colonial history. The story of the name is as complex as the people's history. Look beyond labels, seek the true story. The person who popularized the name Carib was Christopher Columbus, and he spread it across the globe. During his first voyage to the Americas in 1492, he encountered the Taino people on the island of Hispaniola, then Cuba. It was from the Taino that Columbus first heard about the Caniba, also called Cariba. The Taino described them as fierce raiders living on other islands, their sworn enemies. Columbus, eager to find riches, recorded these stories in his journals to justify his expedition. He did not actually meet the Caribs on this first journey, but the tales created a powerful image in his mind. In 1493, the Spanish crown issued a decree allowing capture and enslavement of people deemed hostile or practicing cannibalism. By labeling the Caribs as cannibales, explorers created a legal loophole. It allowed them to attack Carib communities, seize their property, force them into labor, without moral or legal consequences. This provided a convenient justification for conquest and exploitation. The label became a weapon used to dehumanize the Carib people, to portray them as savages to be controlled. Columbus's stories painted a terrifying picture. He wrote of people who supposedly ate human flesh, stole women, and terrorized neighbors. Those accounts were sensationalized and widely circulated in Europe. They created a myth far removed from Carib society's complexity. Inter-island conflict did exist. Ritual uses of human remains occurred in some cultures, but cannibalism as food was a gross exaggeration. The name Carib became synonymous with savagery, a stereotype fought for over 500 years. This act of naming had a profound, enduring impact. It set the stage for centuries of conflict with European powers: Spanish, French, British, Dutch. The Caribs, famed for fierce defense of their homelands, resisted colonization far longer than many groups. Yet the Carib label and the cannibal myth hung over them. It shaped how they were treated and how their history was written. The story of the name Carib is a powerful example of how words and ideas can be used to justify violence and colonization. The story of the Carib people begins long before the arrival of Europeans. Archaeological evidence points to ancestors migrating from the Orinoco River Delta. They spoke a Caribbean language. They joined a wider movement into the Caribbean islands. For years, historians promoted the Carib invasion theory. It claimed Carib men invaded, killed local Arawak men, took Arawak women as wives, explaining some gendered language differences. Modern archaeological and linguistic research challenges that simple story. Scholars now see a much more complex process: long-term migration, trade, intermarriage, cultural exchange across centuries. The Caribbean was a crossroads where groups met and mingled. The Carib culture Europeans met was a blended island development. Then Columbus arrived in the late 15th century, a dramatic turning point. First contact began a brutal era of resistance and survival. Unlike the Taino, the Caribs mounted a prolonged defense. For over 200 years they fought Spanish, then the French, then the British. They used superior sea skills and island knowledge to raid and resist. Dominica became a Carib stronghold. St. Vincent became another. But European warfare, new diseases like smallpox and land loss wore them down. The Second Carib War in St. Vincent in the 1790s was pivotal. It ended with British deportations of thousands of Black Caribs. Black Caribs were people of mixed African and Carib ancestry. Many were sent to Roatan off the coast of Central America. On Dominica, remaining Caribs were confined to a small territory on the rugged eastern coast. That area was officially made the Carib Reserve in 1903. It marked the end of independent Carib control over island territory. The culture of the Carib people was deeply intertwined with the natural world around them. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of the sun, the sea, and the seasons. Their language, part of the Caribbean family, was rich with words for the island's plants, animals, and weather patterns. They were skilled farmers cultivating cassava, sweet potatoes, and corn in small garden plots called conocos. Cassava was a staple. They would grate it, then squeeze out its poisonous juices, and bake it into large, flat cakes of bread. These cakes could be stored for long periods, perfect for sea voyages. Their society was organized around villages, usually led by a headman or chief known as an Ubuntu. This leader was often chosen for his skill as a warrior, or his ability to command respect. Family and kinship were extremely important, with extended families living together in large communal houses called carbets. Carbets were masterfully built from wood and thatch, designed to withstand strong winds and heavy rain. Spiritually, they believed in a variety of spirits that inhabited the natural world. Powerful shamans called boyas could communicate with these spirits, to heal the sick, to predict the future, and to bring success in hunting, or in warfare. The Caribs were renowned for their craftsmanship. They were expert boat builders, carving magnificent canoes from the trunk of a single gommier tree. These canoes could carry dozens of people and supplies, enabling travel across the open sea between islands. They were also skilled in pottery and in weaving. Women wove beautiful, durable baskets from reeds and grasses. Baskets were used for carrying food and for storing belongings. They also wove cotton into hammocks, an invention eagerly adopted by European sailors. Their material culture was practical, beautiful, and perfectly adapted to island life. Many of these traditions, though challenged by centuries of change, live on today. In the Kalinago territory in Dominica, people actively work to preserve their cultural heritage. The food, the stories, and the deep connection to the land and sea are all part of a living culture that continues to define the Kalinago people, a vibrant echo of their rich past. The ethnic composition of the Carib people has never been static. It has been changing and evolving for centuries. Even before the arrival of Europeans, there was mixing between different indigenous groups throughout the islands. The old theory that Carib men took Arawak wives points to an early form of ethnic blending. This created a society that was already a mix of different linguistic and cultural influences. The idea of a pure Carib race, separate from all others, is a historical simplification. The reality was a fluid and dynamic population, constantly shaped by migration, trade, intermarriage long before 1492. The arrival of Europeans and Africans in the Caribbean dramatically accelerated this process of mixing. From the 16th century onward, there were interactions between the Caribs and other groups. These interactions were not always peaceful. However, they also included alliances, the integration of new people into Carib communities. On islands like St. Vincent, a unique new ethnic group emerged. Enslaved Africans who had escaped from plantations or survived shipwrecks found refuge in Carib communities. Over time, these Africans intermarried with the Caribs, creating a new, distinct culture and people known as the Garifuna, or the Black Caribs. The Garifuna developed their own unique culture, which blended African traditions and Carib traditions. They spoke an Arawakan language, but their music, dance, and spiritual beliefs showed strong African influences. Their fierce independence and military skill made them a major power in St. Vincent for many years. This alarmed the British, who saw them as a threat to the plantation system. After the Second Carib War ended in 1797, the British forcibly deported the Garifuna from St. Vincent. They were shipped to the island of Roatan, off the coast of Honduras. From there, they spread along the Caribbean coast of Central America, Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, where their unique culture continues to thrive today. In the remaining Carib communities in the Lesser Antilles, such as the Kalinago territory in Dominica, a similar but different process of mixing occurred. Over the centuries, there was intermarriage with people of African descent and European descent. Today, the Kalinago people reflect this mixed heritage. While they proudly identify with their indigenous ancestry and are committed to preserving their traditions, their physical appearance and genetic makeup tell a story of centuries of interaction with the other peoples who came to call the Caribbean home. Their ethnic identity is not based on a narrow idea of racial purity, but on shared history, a common culture, and a deep connection to their ancestral land. The legacy of the Carib people is all around us, even if we do not always recognize it. Today, the Caribbean is a region of many nations. 13 independent island countries, many more overseas territories and dependencies, making up a mosaic of cultures. The Caribs once lived throughout the Lesser Antilles, Virgin Islands, Trinidad, and Tobago. While their independent societies are gone, their descendants continue to live in specific communities. Kalinago territory in Dominica, St. Vincent, Trinidad, Garifuna communities of Central America. Their presence is a living link to the region's original heritage. The influence of the Caribs echoes in the languages we speak. Hammock, canoe, iguana, barbecue all have their origins in indigenous Caribbean languages. The Caribbean Sea itself is named after them. Islands, rivers, mountains retain names derived from their language, grounding modern geography in an indigenous past. These words are linguistic fossils that tell a story, a subtle but constant reminder of who came first. The story of the Caribs is a lesson in resilience. For centuries they faced displacement, disease, systematic attempts to erase their culture. Misrepresented in history books as savage cannibals. Yet they survived. Kalinago people today, Garifuna communities today. Fighting for land rights, reviving language, proudly practicing their traditions, reclaiming their narrative, and ensuring their story is told in their own voice for future generations. Learning about the Caribs provides a more complete, honest Caribbean history. It challenges the colonial narrative that history began with Columbus. It honors the island's first inhabitants and acknowledges the injustices they suffered. It celebrates the survival of a vibrant culture that continues to enrich the world. Their story is about the past, the present, and the future. The Caribbean's deep historical roots, the spirit of its first people, echoes across the islands and the sea that bear their name.